I'm in the middle of a project right now. I want to film a few things and show everybody how I make a rip saw. These are the saws that I've made that I use to cut the logs and make my blanks for carving projects, for whatever I do, mostly for planes. So the first saw that I made was an old Diston. It was a crosscut saw. It was a 10-point, and I filed every other tooth, basically obliterated the original pattern and turned it into a 5-point rip saw. The second one I received this saw as a gift, and I think I took off all the teeth and I turned this into a 4-point rip saw. So 1 tooth per inch less than the first saw that I made. So that's what I've been using since 2014 to rip my logs. Now I want to do another saw with even coarser teeth. So now I'm going to 3 teeth per inch, and I'm using an old crosscut saw. Before I show you that saw, I want to show you what the saw looked like. It was slightly smaller than this one, but it had very large teeth on it. That's the handle that it has, and there was also an accessory handle on the top of it. Now, on the saw blade that I'm working on, it's quite a bit smaller. This is only a 36-inch blade, and the handle was broken on it, so I took the hardware off and took the handle off. So I'm going to recondition this and reuse it. What I did was I took my grinder. Now the problem with this saw was that somebody ruined the teeth on it, and it was unusable as it was. So what I did was I took a hand grinder and I ground off all the teeth right through the bottom of the gullet. I kept the curve and I ground off all the teeth, and I took a file and I straightened the curve out, took all the waves out because it was a little wavy from the grinder. So I created another smooth curve through it, cleaned it up, took the flat disc on the grinder and blasted off all the rust and the corrosion. Not all of it, but some of it. Covered the edge with tape, and I started my 3-point per inch layout. So 3 points per inch gives you basically, if you think of the first point as 0 on the tape measure, the second point would be at a 1/2 inch, and the third point would be at 1 inch. So I took my scale and I went to the 1/2 inch scale, and I stepped off every 1/2 inch with my 4H pencil, which gives you a very hard point and a very fine point. And I stepped off a 1/2 inch all the way along the blade, and then with my small square I made a square mark off the edge following the curve. So it's just basically a random square line. It's not square off of, like, for instance, any straight edge. It's off the curve. So I did that for every 1/2 inch mark. And then I set my protractor to 30 degrees, which gives me the 60-degree angle of the tooth, the blade tooth that I want on the saw. And what I also did was, back from where this crease is, where the body of the protractor meets the arm of the protractor, I put a piece of tape on the body and I stepped off a 1/2 inch, and I went back and I made 3 marks. That helps me align the protractor on the marks that I made with the square, and then I make the 60-degree mark, which defines each tooth. And I went all the way along here, carefully, slowly, with the 4H pencil, and made all those marks. So now I have a layout that looks like this. Okay, and I also did a preliminary layout just to make sure that it all looked good. This is what it looks like on white paper. Okay, they're really big teeth. They're large. It's going to be a coarse cut. I'm hoping this works fine, and it's not so coarse that it actually is like too hard to use the saw. But we'll see how that works out. was a useless saw anyway. I'm not afraid of experimenting with this. It's not going to be a big deal. So now what I also went ahead and did was I did try this with a metal blade and a jigsaw. It didn't work, so I've been doing this by hand. So I got a couple of teeth cut out, and those were done with a hacksaw. So after I'm done cutting all these roughly with the hacksaw, then I'll go back and turn this blade up, and I'll hit all these with my triangular file. I have a real fresh one. It's a cheap one. It's not a name brand, but it's a knockoff, and it was not too expensive. And I'll file all these teeth. And the principle of filing these teeth is the same as what you may have seen me do when I made the floats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to file everything. Then I'm going to hit the tops of the teeth on both sides of the tooth with magic marker. And then I'm going to take my flat file and I'm going to reshape the curve, but along the tips of all the teeth. And when I just kiss the magic marker off of the tops of all the teeth and I have a fresh curve, then I will color the teeth again with magic marker, and I will recut and tune each tooth so that the magic marker just disappears to within, hopefully to within one file stroke. Once that's done, I'll set the teeth. I have a saw set, and I'll show everybody how I do that. So I've come a long way already with this. There's a couple of hours of work doing all the work with the hacksaw, but it's coming along real nice, and I want to be able to show everybody how I do this, because there's no sense in showing you how I work with the logs without showing you how I cut the logs. I don't have access to a chainsaw or any heavy-duty power tools. This is how I do it. So I'm really hoping that with this saw blade is about 8 inches longer than everything else that I showed before. So I'm hoping that on some of the bigger logs it's easier to work, because you can pull more of the saw through the same cut as you're pushing it. So let me stop here and I'll come back when I got everything cut and I have something else to film. This is the first step here. Making some progress on this blade. What I did was I cut about, maybe 10 teeth with the hacksaw, and it was slow going, and makes a big racket because that blade wants to squeal. So I decided to take everything outside, and I cut the rest of the teeth with a grinder. And I found that what helps, let me see if I could illustrate it, but if you pass a little bit extra on the vertical cut with the grinder, what it does is it makes a space for the corner of the file, because this is really the least efficient part of the file, and by taking that metal away before you cut the face of and bottom of the tooth with the file, you don't have to use this corner of the file to make that cut and find its way down into the cut. So I try and go a little bit extra with the grinding wheel. Heat is your enemy. Some of these teeth got a little warm, and you can feel the difference when the teeth, the file should pass through the tooth, and you could feel it grab and cut as you push it. When the tooth gets warmed up, it starts to get a little hard, and then when you push the file, it skips across instead of digging in and cutting. So you want to be real careful if you do it with a grinder. So what I did was I took a flat file, and holding it like this, I went over all the teeth. And what that does is it knocks off the top of any teeth that is sticking up too high. So what you're trying to do is lower the high teeth down and make them all, the tops of all the teeth line up. So when you file the top of the tooth, there's going to be a flat spot. Then what I do is I take a heavy magic marker and I use black, and what I do is I color all the teeth with the magic marker. And then what I do is I take the file and I cut the tooth so that it gets lower, and I reduce the flat spot until it disappears and it becomes a point again. And the theory is that you'll tune all the teeth just enough so that that black spot, the magic marker, disappears, and then the tops of all these teeth should be in line, more or less. If this was a straight saw and it was a fine saw, you'd want them all in a row so you can make a really classy cut with a, like a 12-point or a 10-point cross-cut saw. This is a 4-point or 3-point rip saw, so you really can't go wrong. The idea of lining all the teeth up is so that you don't have one hanging down lower than the others or higher than the others, however you want to look at it, so that that tooth does more work, slows up the cut, slows up the passage of the sawdust out of the kerf, etc., etc. It's more efficient. It works more efficient when all the teeth are lined up. So that's how I do it. The other thing that has to be done is the grinder and the file will produce a burr that's on one side or the other of the saw blade itself. Now the one side I still have the tape on it, so I'm not going to take the burr off of this side until I remove the tape. But on the other side, you want that pretty much cleaned up, because it's just more debris and more metal that the file has to pass over, and it may interfere with the level of accuracy that you can attain with the file. So I did that, and I take that burr off with files or a stone, water stone, whatever you have to do. Just clean off the one face of the blade. So I have a block of wood set up vertically, and it's pinched in place with some other blocks that are clamped to my little workstation that I have here. And then what I do is I have one, see, I have a tooth right here that's got black on it, and it's a little bit of a racket. I usually use hearing protection for this, and it's just a process of filing away the black. So right here I have a flat spot, and what I want to do is make that flat spot go away, and as soon as that black spot disappears, that means I have a point. And then I go to the next tooth. And theoretically, you could still have error in this, and you could then run a file over it, color them all in, and tune it again if you had to. I think this is going to be fine just by tuning it once. So the idea with the file, these are chisel teeth. There's no, I forget what you call it, skew or fleam in these teeth. The face of each tooth is 90 degrees to the side of the saw blade. So, and then it's also 90 degrees the other way. So the idea is to hold the file straight and to hold the file straight this way. So it's a simple cut. It's 90 and 90 this way. And you're just going to follow each tooth and file it to a point, and then you're done. And the step after that is to set the teeth. So I'm going to keep going with this. There's really not much to film. It's just simple file work, but I'll come back after this is cleaned up, and then I'll show everybody how I set the teeth on this blade. I got all the teeth filed. They come to a really nice point, and I use a magnifying glass to get a really good look at everything that I'm filing. But the other thing you can do as a test is just run your fingertip over it, and you'll feel the points of the teeth grabbing. Kind of like the way I test a fish hook to see if they're sharp. Same theory. You want it to come to a really good point. And I find that the magnifying glass really helps me. So I have a saw set. This is an antique. It was given to me as a gift, and I'm finding it invaluable. I don't think a modern saw set works any differently than these. So the way it works is when you depress the handle back here, it operates this plunger right here, down here. I'll show you that. Okay, and then back here is like what I call an anvil, and that's stationary, and that has a slight angle on it, and what happens is the plunger pushes the tooth over, and it folds over, it leans over until it hits the anvil and it stops. And that's what keeps each tooth leaned over the same way on each tooth. And the set is what creates enough room for the rest of the saw body to pass through the cut. So there's a lot of ins and outs as to how much to set the tooth, and I really don't get involved in that. There's an adjustable screw here. This might have had different anvils for different teeth. I'm really not getting involved in any of that. I use this saw set for every saw that I made so far, so I'm going to keep using it. So the idea is that you're going to face the saw one way. So I have this saw facing basically this way, and I'm going to do every other tooth. Then I'm going to flip the saw around and face it this way, and then I'm going to do every other tooth and turn the tooth the other way, so that each tooth is going to alternate as it goes down the saw. That's the theory involved in this. And one of the other reasons why you got to keep heat off these tooth is to keep the steel soft, not only so that you could cut it with the file, but also so that you can push the tip over with the saw set. You don't want them to be in a position where they're so hard that as you push it over, the tip of the tooth snaps off. You're going to create a mess. So this is going to be literally the first tooth that I do back here. So now this little rod, I don't know if you could see it, but it comes to a point right up in there, and that's where you want the tip of the tooth. So you're going to push the tooth over the same way every time. Now the other thing is, this part back here is adjustable. There's a thumb screw back here, and that's to adjust the anvil for the thickness of the saw blade. So this little space right in here represents the thickness of the saw blade. So you let this thing rest. And go over, skip one tooth, go over to the next one, I'm going to go back to this one. It's really not leaned over that much. Let's see. Okay. Now what you want to do is you want to be real careful, especially on your first pass down the saw, that you only go every other tooth, because if you mess that up, you're going to interrupt the pattern for the entire saw. You have to go every other one the first way down, and then every other one back the other way. If you interrupt that pattern, you're going to interrupt the pattern for the whole saw, and you're going to have a mess. And then the idea is that these teeth stay set the same way. So now if you come to if you have a real good set in your teeth and you resharpen this, as long as the set is good, you could leave it. You don't have to reset the teeth after every time you sharpen it. Now what I did do, again, right after I finished filing all these teeth, was I took the sharpening stone and I honed the side of the blade. You want all this through here to be smooth. So in other words, the file and the grinder give a little burr right through here. You want all that to be removed so that when you set the tooth, that's the only thing that provides friction in the cut. You don't want to have a burr in there. It's going to drag and it's just going to make your life miserable. And because of the set, you won't be able to touch it with a stone. So while everything is still flat, hone it all down, clean it up, and then move forward. Alright, so I'm going to continue with this, and when I come back I'll have the handle on this, and we're going to give this a test. Alright, I'm going to try out the saw. I got the end of a log. It's already been laid out. This is an old piece. Some checking on it, but it's got a layout line. So I'm going to start the cut with the 5-point rip saw. Okay. Let me go to the 4-point saw. Okay, it's opened up pretty good. Let's try the new saw. It's the first time using it. See how this works. Not bad. That's how it's done. Usually I stand this up so I can see the top of this line and the face of that line and get everything to connect in the same plane. But that's the idea. Pretty good. So this one's a wrap. I'm going to do some more work on the handle, but that's the basic principle. This will get you on the road to harvesting your own lumber from logs that you take from the curb. This is how I do it, all by hand, and it's a good workout too. All right, everybody. That's why you got to stay strong, because it's a workout. There's a lot more work to do. Have a good day. Thank you.